For Media Watch now, and Emma James is with us in the studio. And Emma, we're going to start with a story right here in France because there are concerns about press freedoms after a senior journalist at Le Monde was summoned by the security services, and she is not the first, is she?
No, absolutely not. Le Monde has said it is very concerned about what's happening, and the world is watching. The Washington Post, among those reporting on this story, Ariane Chemin, who is a very experienced journalist for Le Monde, was called in for questioning. She will appear next week before the DGSI, which is the Domestic Intelligence Services, basically the equivalent of the FBI in the US or MI5 in the United Kingdom. Now, what she's been will be questioned about is the Alexandre Benalla affair. You may remember going back now to last year, she was actually the one to break the story. Hugely damaging to the French president, probably the most damaging thing other than the yellow vest protests. Among her stories, ones like this, The Men in the Élysée Shadows in the Spotlight, which revealed that others were complicit in trying to cover up and cover for Benalla. Benalla, of course, was a very close aide to the president. He was often seen at his side. He was the deputy to the president's chief of staff. And he was often seen right next to Emmanuel Macron on the campaign trail when he was aiming to become president. This is the image of him from the May Day protest last year, where he was supposed to be there to observe police. He ended up actually violently assaulting. He was caught on camera violently assaulting protesters and wearing a police armband when he shouldn't actually have been getting involved at all. He was just there to watch because he's not a police officer. Now, as you said, Ariane Chemin is not the only journalist to be questioned by the Domestic Intelligence Services. Luc Brunet, who is the editor of Le Monde, says in 4 months, 8 journalists have now been called to be questioned, including a woman from Quotidien, a television show here in France, who reported on arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And there was also another story about arms sales, French weapons being used in the conflict in Yemen, which was uncovered by journalists working for the NGO Disclose. They have already been questioned and they could face 5 years in jail or a sizable fine because they're accused of compromising secrets of national defence. There's a very interesting piece in The Intercept because those journalists have already been questioned, and this journalist has obviously spoken to them about exactly what happens when you are called in for questioning by these people. They were taken to a heavily fortified building, taken 4 floors below ground, and then quizzed about their sources and their social media posts, among other things, obviously the stories that they've covered as well.
It's not the sort of thing you expect to hear about in France in 2019.
No, absolutely, because France has been very critical of other countries who don't treat journalists well, but this does seem to be a worrying trend right now. Now, the government spokesperson, a woman by the name of Sibeth Ndiaye, has said that this is normal, but as far as she's concerned, journalists can be subjected to judicial review, scrutiny, just the same as any other person here in France. And she says it is about protecting the defence and security information which needs to be kept away from
and it's about journalists
eyes.
Protecting their sources as well.
Well, exactly.
She got into a bit of hot water over that, I think, as well.
It is an interesting one because protecting your sources is a key part of journalism, and Lobs is talking about that, saying that this is death by 1,000 cuts, those in power seeking to intimidate whistleblowers. But they say it's a futile attempt to do so because they say very clearly that they don't believe French journalists would ever give up their sources. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. I think if people are intimidated enough, then they will. But the National Journalists Union, the SNJ, has spoken out saying something very unhealthy is happening in this country. Many newsrooms and many unions have signed up to a letter condemning what's happening, saying that the protection of sources has been recognised by the European Court of Human Rights as one of the very cornerstones of the freedom of the press. France 24 among those to sign up to this piece, which has been published in Le Monde. It's interesting to note that this comes at a time when France has actually slipped a place in the World Press Freedom Index. This year, year 2019, it moved down to 32 out of 180. Part of a wider trend, it has to be said, of countries who you might expect to be doing better than that.
Yeah, I remember talking about that when that report came out. That is a really worrying story for everyone in France. OK, let's talk about something else, because in the UK, a new satirical chat show, and these are a bit of a thing across the channel, aren't they?
Indeed.
And this one has raised some eyebrows because of a Russian host who bears resemblance to a certain world leader, may we say?
Absolutely, yes. The BBC has unveiled Tonight with Vladimir Putin. It is, of course, not the real Russian president. It is a digital effigy, but interviewing very real guests. Here you can see him giving a high five to Alastair Campbell, who used to be the spokesperson to the former Prime Minister Tony Blair. But it seems to have had a pretty poor reaction so far.
In Moscow or in London?
Everywhere.
Ah, really? OK.
Take a look at the trailer that the BBC put on Twitter yesterday.
Greetings, people of the United Kingdom. I am Vladimir Putin. I have won many great victories, but none of them made me truly happy, because until now, the greatest victory has eluded me. That of #1 chat show in the UK! So watch out, Graham Norton, I'm coming for you!
I can't imagine why people don't like the look of it.
It's a bit cheeky, isn't it?
Absolutely. Looking on Twitter, no one seems to like this, including Sasha Gorionov, who is a Russian living in the United Kingdom. Well, this is baffling, she says. Another person has commented, what the hell kind of weird Western propaganda is this? I think my favourite response is this one. Also, why is he voiced as a flamboyant Greek man? Because the accent definitely not on point. Now, the Russians aren't too happy either. They have said that they see this as anti-Russian propaganda, and the Kremlin has reportedly complained that the BBC never asked to be able to use the president's image. It's unlikely that they would have done anyway. Only 2 shows have been made, 2 12-minute pilots. We don't yet know when they're going to be screened. Perhaps after this reaction, they may never get to see the light of day. We will wait and see.
I wonder if the Russians are going to come up with their own Theresa May chat show.
Oh, dear.
Might not be around for too long.
The mind boggles.
Yes, it does indeed. Emma, thank you very much indeed, as always. Media Watch there.